when Elliot Knight discovers that his husband Gavin has been cheating on him with his brother, Liam. He decides to use his skills in psychology and forensic science to take control. In a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, Elliot devises an intricate plan to trap them both. But the real question remains, who will be the hunter and who will be the prey? Part 1. The conflict unfolds. It was a quiet evening when Elliot Knight, a forensic expert with a keen eye for details, stumbled upon something that would shatter the very foundation of his life. It wasn't an autopsy report or a crime scene waiting to be solved, it was something much more personal. In the midst of his life, built meticulously over years of hard work, he discovered that the two people he trusted most were betraying him. His husband, his brother. Elliot had spent his entire life constructing an empire from the ground up. A renowned forensic doctor, he had perfected the art of crime scene analysis and psychological profiling. His company, which offered injury assessments to insurance firms, had become a staple in the industry. He wasn't just a doctor, he was a trailblazer, respected and admired by his peers, and deeply committed to the people who relied on his work. Yet, for all his professional success, there was a dark cloud looming over his personal life, one he couldn't ignore any longer. His husband, Gavin Hayes, was everything Elliot could have asked for. Intelligent, driven, and ambitious, Gavin had built his own career as a scientist, earning a doctorate in physics before branching out into business. He was the kind of man who never settled for mediocrity, always pushing forward, always striving for more. The two had met years ago, during a conference, and instantly connected. Their shared passions, values, and ambitions made their bond seem unbreakable. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. Elliot had sensed it. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the lies that didn't quite add up. Gavin, once so attentive and loving, had begun to slip away, and Elliot could feel the distance growing between them. He had tried to ignore it, burying himself in his work, but the cracks in their relationship were undeniable. One day, while working late at his office, Elliot received a notification on his phone. It was a message from an anonymous number, with a file attached. His fingers hesitated over the screen, a knot forming in his stomach as he opened it. The file was a series of photos, taken discreetly, showing Gavin in a compromising position, locked in a passionate embrace with someone he never thought he'd see in that way. The man in the photos wasn't a stranger, it was his brother, Liam Knight. Liam, his younger brother, the one person who had always looked up to him, who had followed in his footsteps, learning the ropes of the family business, and who had always been there for him, or so Elliot thought. Liam had always been the innocent one in Elliot's eyes, the younger sibling with an idealistic view of the world. But now, the truth was staring him in the face. His own flesh and blood had betrayed him, not just with his husband, but with a calculated, ruthless plan to tear his life apart. As Elliot sat frozen in his office chair, staring at the images on his phone, the weight of the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Gavin, his devoted husband, had not only been cheating on him, but he had also been conspiring with Liam to strip him of everything he had worked so hard to build. His company, his assets, his reputation, all of it was at risk. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, and it was clear that Gavin and Liam had planned this for a long time. Elliot felt a surge of anger, but it wasn't just anger, it was a cold, calculated fury. As a forensic doctor, he knew how to observe, how to analyze, how to piece together information. He knew how to investigate, to dig into the darkest corners of a person's life and expose their secrets. And now, he was going to use those skills to turn the tables on the two people who had wronged him. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Elliot wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. If they thought they could take everything from him without consequences, they were sorely mistaken. He had spent years honing his craft, learning how to read people, understanding the subtle shifts in their behavior, and now he was going to apply that knowledge to expose them for who they truly were. The first step, Elliot knew, was to gather evidence, solid, irrefutable proof that Gavin and Liam had been plotting against him. The photos on his phone were a good start, but he needed more. He needed to be sure, and he needed to be methodical. After all, he was a professional, and professionals didn't act on impulse, they acted with precision. That night, Elliot set the wheels in motion. He called in a favor from his old friend, Jason Grant, a hacker he had once helped out in a tricky case. Jason owed him, and now was the perfect time to collect. Elliot needed access to Gavin's phone, his emails, anything that would give him insight into the depths of the betrayal. And Jason, with his technical prowess, was the man who could get it done. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet observation and careful planning. Elliot had to act as if nothing had changed, as if he didn't know the truth. He kept his interactions with Gavin and Liam professional, almost distant, hiding the storm of emotion brewing inside. But every word, every movement, every glance was carefully analyzed. Elliot wasn't just waiting for them to slip up, he was orchestrating the downfall. It wasn't long before Jason sent him the first batch of information. Emails, messages, documents, all showing a pattern of manipulation and deceit. Gavin had been hiding money, setting up accounts under false names, and working with Liam to siphon off funds from Elliot's business. They had planned to push him out, to take control of everything he had built, and to leave him with nothing. Elliot sat back, looking at the evidence in front of him. It was worse than he had imagined. The depth of their betrayal, the level of planning and deception, was staggering, but instead of feeling defeated, Elliot felt empowered. He had the truth, he had the evidence, and now, he was going to make them pay. But as he reviewed the files, something began to stir inside him, a quiet voice, almost whispering, a realization, a shift in perspective. He wasn't just going to expose them for what they had done. He was going to make sure they would never see it coming. In the days that followed, Elliot began to execute his plan. He started with Gavin. He played the part of the loving, confused husband, hiding his suspicions behind a mask of trust. He listened to Gavin's excuses, nodding along as if everything was fine, even when he could barely stand the sight of him. It was all a game now, a game that Elliot was determined to win. Meanwhile, he kept a close eye on Liam, watching for any signs of weakness, any cracks in his carefully constructed facade. Liam, too, was playing his part, pretending to be the concerned brother, the one who was there to support him. But Elliot knew better. Liam was nothing but a snake in the grass, and Elliot was ready to strike when the time was right. As the tension mounted, Elliot couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. He had spent his career uncovering the darkest secrets of others. But now, for the first time, he was the one with the power. The roles had reversed, and Elliot was the one holding all the cards. Gavin and Liam thought they could outsmart him, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The stage was set, the game had begun, and Elliot Knight wasn't about to lose. Part 2, the investigation and the unveiling of the truth. Some secrets are better left buried, but some are worth the destruction that comes with uncovering them. Elliot Knight had never been more sure of one thing in his life: nothing would stop him from exposing the truth. The images, the evidence, it all painted a picture so much darker than he had ever imagined. Gavin, his husband, the man he once trusted more than anyone, was not only unfaithful but deeply involved in a financial scheme to steal everything Elliot had worked for. His younger brother, Liam, had played a part in it all, weaving a web of lies and deceit. But Elliot wasn't a man who was easily defeated. He was a professional, a forensic doctor who specialized in psychological profiling. His entire career had been built on uncovering the truth hidden beneath layers of deception. Now, he was on the other side of the equation, determined to unearth every lie Gavin and Liam had carefully buried, no matter the cost. The first step was to gather concrete proof, something undeniable that would hold up against any manipulation or denial. The photos were a good start, but Elliot needed more. He needed to know the full extent of Gavin's betrayal, how far it went, and what kind of financial dealings they were involved in. He needed to peel back the layers of Gavin's life, just as he would dissect a crime scene, and to do that, he would need help. Elliot's best friend, Alex Carter, was the first person he turned to, a fellow forensic expert and someone who had been by his side through thick and thin. Alex was the only person who knew just how far Elliot had fallen. They'd shared many late nights talking about everything and nothing, until now. This time, their conversation was different. "Alex, I need you to help me. I need to know everything. Every single thing Gavin and Liam have been hiding. I can't just confront them without knowing the full extent of their betrayal." Alex listened intently, sensing the gravity of the situation. She had always been there for Elliot, offering support during tough times. But this was beyond anything they had ever dealt with together. "You've got it, Elliot, but you know we can't just dive in without the right tools. This is going to get ugly. Fast." "I'm ready for ugly," Elliot replied coldly. He wasn't the same man who had walked into this relationship years ago. This Elliot was someone who had been wronged, and now he was going to make sure the truth came out. Alex didn't waste any time. She used her connections to gather all the information they could on Gavin's and Liam's recent activities. It wasn't easy, but Elliot knew that with Alex's help, they could dig deep enough to expose their darkest secrets. She found out about several offshore accounts, suspicious financial transfers, and even a few companies that seemed to be involved in laundering money. It was clear Gavin had been planning something big, and Liam was right there with him, helping him pull the strings from the shadows. But they needed something more. They needed to hear it from the horse's mouth. That's where Jason Grant came in, a hacker with a murky past. Jason had once been accused of a crime he didn't commit, until Elliot helped clear his name. Now, he owed Elliot, and this was the perfect opportunity to call in that favor. Jason was not only a tech genius, he was also a master of accessing information others thought was impossible to find. Elliot sat across from Jason in his small apartment, the glow of multiple monitors illuminating Jason's face. The air was thick with the hum of machines, and Elliot felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had always prided himself on his ability to solve cases. But this was personal. "I need access to Gavin's phone and his computer," Elliot said, his voice steady but laced with the anger he could no longer suppress. "I need everything. Emails, text messages, call logs. If they've been hiding something, I'll find it." Jason cracked his knuckles, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "You sure you want to do this? Once I get into his systems, it's all out in the open. There's no turning back." "I'm not turning back," Elliot replied, his voice sharp. Jason didn't hesitate. Within moments, he had bypassed the security on Gavin's devices. The first few files that appeared on the screen were enough to make Elliot's stomach churn. The emails, the text messages, they were full of coded language, mentions of offshore accounts, and encrypted documents. But it was the phone records that really caught Elliot's attention. Gavin had been in constant contact with Liam, calls, texts, even video chats. The frequency of their communication was staggering, and it wasn't about business. No, these were messages filled with innuendos, shared plans, and discussions of money that wasn't meant to be shared with Elliot. The worst part, Gavin had been using Liam to funnel money out of their joint accounts and into various shady operations. They were plotting to sell off Elliot's company, his life's work, and to divide the assets between themselves. It was a betrayal so deep, Elliot couldn't quite comprehend the scale of it all. The man he had loved had been planning his destruction for months, maybe even years. With the evidence in hand, Elliot felt a strange sense of both dread and empowerment. The truth was no longer a shadow, it was right in front of him. Glaringly clear, but with that truth came the realization that he couldn't just confront Gavin and Liam without preparing for the consequences. These were two people who had shown they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Elliot had to be careful. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about making sure Gavin and Liam paid for what they had done to him, to his company, and to their family. The tension between Elliot, Gavin, and Liam grew palpable over the next few days. Elliot couldn't show his hand yet. He had to remain calm, collected, as though everything was normal. He had to continue playing the role of the unsuspecting husband while he figured out the next move. But every moment spent in their company felt like a game of Russian roulette. Elliot was just waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. The more time passed, the more Gavin seemed to unravel. He became increasingly paranoid, his behavior erratic. The lie was starting to show in his eyes, even as he tried to maintain his cool, the cracks in his facade widening. But it wasn't just Gavin who was feeling the heat. Liam was acting more cautiously, too. The once confident younger brother had begun second-guessing his every move. And Elliot could see it in the way he interacted with Gavin. He wasn't just playing the innocent brother anymore. Liam was covering up something. Elliot was sure of it. Elliot knew that the next step was crucial. He had to act fast, before they realized just how much he had uncovered. With the evidence now fully in his possession, Elliot began to devise a plan. He would confront Gavin and Liam together, but on his own terms. He would expose them for what they were: fraudsters, liars, and manipulators. But he wouldn't do it out of anger. No, he would expose them with precision, with cold, calculated revenge. The stage was set. Elliot had everything he needed: the evidence, the truth, and a plan that would shake Gavin and Liam to their core. All he had to do now was wait for the perfect moment to confront them, when they least expected it. As Elliot prepared for the confrontation, one thought lingered in his mind: no one could escape the truth. Not even Gavin, not even Liam. The time for hiding was over. The investigation had only just begun, and the end was closer than anyone realized. And when it all came crashing down, Elliot would make sure they felt every ounce of the destruction they had caused. The storm was coming, and no one could stop it now. Part 3: Revenge and the Trap. Elliot knew that the only way to take back control, to make Gavin and Liam feel the weight of their betrayal, was to use the greatest weapon against them: trust. For months, he had played the part of the unsuspecting husband, the weak man, broken by the lies of the two people closest to him. But now, the time had come for him to turn the tables. He wasn't the victim anymore. He was the one in control, and he was about to make them believe they held the power. He had already gathered the evidence, everything he needed to ruin their lives. But the real game, the one that would break them, was psychological. They had made a fatal mistake by thinking they could outsmart him. Now, it was his turn to deceive them, to make them believe that he had given up, that he was the one desperate for their help. He had to make them feel like they were in control, all while he slowly pulled the strings from behind the scenes. Elliot's plan was simple: play the part of the broken, fragile man who had been destroyed by the ones he loved, and use that facade to his advantage. Gavin and Liam, in their arrogance, believed Elliot was too broken to retaliate. But they were wrong. He wasn't going to crumble. Instead, he would make them pay for every lie, every betrayal, every single moment they had spent plotting behind his back. He began by carefully crafting his persona. He would appear vulnerable, sick, frail, and emotionally shattered. He would drop hints of his supposed pain, of the torment he had endured. And as they saw him deteriorating, they would let their guard down. They would begin to think they could manipulate him further, get closer to him, all while Elliot gathered more information and prepared for the final strike. It worked, slowly but surely. Gavin and Liam began to treat him with a mixture of sympathy and arrogance. They believed they had won. Gavin, in particular, became increasingly condescending, while Liam acted like the protective, caring brother. But beneath that act, Elliot knew the truth. They weren't caring. They were merely making sure their victim was weak enough to be fully controlled. Elliot played his part well. He let Gavin and Liam see only what they wanted to see: a man on the verge of collapse. Emotionally wrecked by their betrayal, he had become a master of the mask, hiding his true intentions behind a wall of vulnerability. But every smile, every tear, every word of self-pity was a carefully calculated move. The next step in Elliot's plan was a financial trap that would make Gavin and Liam believe they were walking into a golden opportunity. A false project, a fabricated scheme that would make them think they had everything to gain, while Elliot silently prepared to take everything back. Elliot had carefully researched the healthcare industry, looking for the perfect angle. He pitched the idea to Gavin and Liam as a high-risk, high-reward venture, something that would catapult their finances into the stratosphere. The project sounded legitimate, the kind of thing that would excite ambitious minds like theirs. They would jump at the chance, thinking it was their big break. But Elliot wasn't interested in the project. He wasn't even interested in the money that might come from it. What he wanted was control over their assets, their trust, and their desperation. By creating a false narrative of success, Elliot set the stage for Gavin and Liam to make one fatal mistake: they would begin to trust him completely, blindly. He convinced them that the project required a significant investment, one that would help kickstart the venture. But instead of asking for funds from their joint account, Elliot suggested that the money be transferred directly into his own personal account as a contingency fund. Gavin, eager to move forward with the project, agreed. Liam, ever the opportunist, was quick to support the idea. Elliot had them right where he wanted them. They believed they were making a wise decision, one that would propel them to success. Meanwhile, Elliot quietly siphoned off the funds into his own account, building up a nest egg he would later use to take back everything they had stolen from him. It was a brilliant move, one that gave Elliot the upper hand in their financial game. Gavin and Liam thought they were the ones calling the shots, but they were blind to the fact that Elliot had already won. They were so focused on the illusion of success that they never noticed how their money was slowly slipping through their fingers. But Elliot didn't stop there. No, he had something even more devious in mind, a plan that would send Gavin into a spiral of panic and force him to give up everything he had. A fake kidnapping. It was a classic move, something Elliot had learned from his years in forensic psychology. The concept was simple: create a crisis so overwhelming, so real, that it would push Gavin to the edge. And in his panic, he would make mistakes, big mistakes. Elliot orchestrated everything down to the smallest detail. He enlisted the help of a few trusted friends, who helped stage the entire incident. They would make it look like Elliot had been abducted, taken right from his home in the dead of night. The kidnappers would leave behind a note demanding a large sum of money for his release. Gavin, ever the protective husband, would have no choice but to pay up, desperate to get his husband back. Elliot's plan was to use this fabricated crisis to drain Gavin's remaining resources. He knew that Gavin's pride wouldn't allow him to admit that he had been manipulated. He would do whatever it took to keep up appearances, to maintain control of the situation. But as the ransom money piled up, Elliot knew Gavin would reach his breaking point. The night of the kidnapping arrived, and Elliot was ready. He had made sure to leave his phone behind. His last communication designed to make Gavin believe it was real. The fake kidnappers sent the ransom note, and everything fell into place. Gavin, frantic, rushed to gather the money, his mind racing with worry and guilt. But the deeper Gavin dug into his pockets, the more he lost control of his finances, and the more Elliot gained. Gavin immediately called his closest business partners and the people he trusted to help him arrange the payment. But Elliot's team had already infiltrated those circles, and the money was being funneled straight into accounts that Elliot controlled. The more Gavin scrambled to arrange the payment, the more his empire began to crumble. Meanwhile, Elliot watched it all unfold from a safe distance. He knew Gavin well enough to understand how he would react. He knew that the fear of losing Elliot, combined with his desire to protect his reputation, would drive him to act recklessly. It was the perfect setup, the perfect trap. But as the hours dragged on, Elliot could sense that Gavin was beginning to crack. The frantic phone calls, the desperate attempts to negotiate with the kidnappers, it was all a facade. And Elliot could see right through it. Gavin was losing control. He was drowning in the very situation he had thought he could control. And that's when Elliot made his move. At the height of Gavin's panic, Elliot revealed himself to be very much alive. He returned home, walking into the living room with a cold smile on his face. Gavin's eyes widened in shock, and for the first time in years, Elliot saw genuine fear in his husband's eyes. Elliot stood there, watching Gavin's shock melt into disbelief. Gavin stumbled forward, trying to find the words, but they caught in his throat. How could you do this?" Gavin finally whispered, his voice strained. Elliot's smile remained cold, unyielding. "You made a mistake, Gavin. You thought you could break me, but all you've done is push me to my breaking point. Now it's my turn." The trap was set. The evidence was irrefutable, the money was gone, and the betrayal had been laid bare. Gavin and Liam were cornered, and they had no idea how they had fallen into Elliot's perfectly executed revenge. "All this time, you've been playing games with me," Elliot said, his voice steady, cutting through the tension. "But the game is over now. You've lost." And with those words, the final phase of Elliot's plan was complete. Gavin and Liam had underestimated him. They had thought they were the ones in control, but they had no idea that Elliot had been playing a much longer game. The truth had been revealed. The power had shifted, and Elliot Knight, the man they had tried to destroy, was now the one holding all the cards. Part 4, The Climax and Resolution. The day had arrived, the day Elliot Knight had carefully planned for, when the truth would come crashing down around Gavin and Liam, exposing their lies and deceit to everyone they had tried to manipulate. A lavish birthday party at an upscale restaurant had been the perfect setting. The lights, the music, the laughter, all designed to create the illusion of celebration and joy. But beneath the surface, there was a storm waiting to break, and Elliot was ready to be the one to unleash it. It was a grand affair, with high-profile guests and expensive decorations filling the room. The atmosphere was filled with the clinking of champagne glasses, soft laughter, and conversations that seemed innocent at first glance. But for Elliot, this wasn't a night of celebration. This was the stage for his final act, the moment he would expose Gavin and Liam for what they truly were. He had everything ready: the recordings, the videos, the proof. He had spent months collecting the evidence, the messages, the secret calls, the videos that painted a picture too dark to ignore. Gavin and Liam, in their arrogance, thought they were untouchable, that they could continue their betrayal without consequence. But Elliot had been patient, and now, the time had come. With a calculated calm, Elliot stood by the stage, his eyes scanning the crowd. He knew Gavin was there, looking confident and proud, believing everything was still in his control. Liam was beside him, pretending to be the supportive brother, unaware that his entire world was about to implode. Elliot had prepared a special presentation. He had arranged for a large screen to be set up at the front of the room, framed by elegant lights. The moment was approaching. The guests, oblivious to the storm about to hit them, chatted amongst themselves. But Elliot was focused. He had waited long enough. It was time to bring the truth into the light. The music slowly faded, and a spotlight fell on Elliot as he stepped up to the microphone. The room grew quieter, sensing that something important was about to happen. He smiled, but it wasn't the smile of a man celebrating. It was the smile of a man who had been wronged, a man who had taken control of his fate. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elliot began, his voice steady and calm, "thank you for joining us tonight. I'm sure we're all looking forward to the celebration. But before we continue, I have a few things to share with you, some truths that need to be seen, because it's time to end the lies." The audience shifted uneasily, exchanging curious glances, but Elliot didn't let the tension distract him. He clicked a button on the remote in his hand, and the first video began to play. It was a recording of Gavin and Liam, captured in secret, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a dimly lit room. They were speaking casually at first, but as the video progressed, it became clear that their words were far from innocent. The images that followed were even worse, pictures of them in bed together, exchanging passionate kisses and whispered words of betrayal. The room was silent. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes glued to the screen. But Elliot wasn't finished. The next clip showed a series of phone calls between Gavin and Liam, talking about transferring money into hidden accounts, discussing how to manipulate Elliot into giving up control of the company. The tone of the conversations was chilling, as they plotted the financial takeover behind Elliot's back. They had believed they could keep this secret from him, that he would never find out. But Elliot had found out, and now, the entire room knew. As the final video played, showing Gavin in a shady meeting with people who were clearly involved in illegal activities, Elliot saw the looks of shock on the faces around him. This was no longer just a personal betrayal, it was a criminal one. Gavin had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. As the last clip ended, the screen went black. The silence in the room was deafening. Elliot watched as Gavin stood frozen, his face pale with shock. Liam, on the other hand, was sweating, his hands trembling slightly. They had been exposed, and they knew it. Gavin was the first to recover, his eyes darting around the room, searching for a way out, a way to salvage his reputation. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure, but his voice cracked as he spoke. "Elliot, you don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. We were just what?" Elliot interjected, his voice ice cold. "You were just betraying me with my own brother. You were just plotting to steal everything I worked for." Gavin's eyes shifted, but he couldn't come up with a plausible explanation. The damage was done. Liam, on the other hand, tried to play the innocent brother, but his efforts were futile. The evidence spoke for itself. The words, the images, the phone calls, there was no way to deny what had happened. Elliot knew their game now, and they couldn't play it anymore. "You think you can control me? That I would just stand by while you destroy my life?" Elliot's voice grew louder, his anger now fully unleashed. "You made a fatal mistake, Gavin, and now you'll face the consequences." The guests in the room were all watching, some with sympathy, others with shock, but none of them could look away. The once confident Gavin and Liam were now cornered, trapped in the web they had so carefully woven. There was no escape, no way to talk their way out of this. As Elliot stepped forward, He looked directly at Gavin. "You wanted to take everything from me, my company, my life, my trust, but now, you've lost it all, and it's not just me who will make you pay." The final piece of Elliot's plan fell into place. He had already taken steps to ensure that the legal system would now be involved. He had contacted the authorities before the party, ready to bring down the full force of the law on Gavin and Liam. "These videos and recordings will be handed over to the police," Elliot continued, his tone unwavering. "The illegal activities, the financial fraud, it's all here, and trust me, the consequences will be severe." Gavin's face twisted in anger, but it was clear that the fight had left him. His empire, built on lies and manipulation, was crumbling before his eyes. "You won't get away with this, Elliot," he spat. "You'll regret this." Elliot's smile was cold. "Regret? No, Gavin, the only one who will regret anything is you. You destroyed everything I had. And now, I'm taking it all back." With a nod from Elliot, the authorities arrived at the restaurant, ready to arrest Gavin and Liam for their crimes. The two men were led out of the room in handcuffs, their faces filled with disbelief. Their world had fallen apart, and they had no one to blame but themselves. The aftermath of the party was chaotic. The media swarmed, the police conducted their investigation, and Gavin and Liam faced the consequences of their actions. Their wealth, their status, everything they had built, was gone. Gavin lost his company, his reputation was destroyed, and the charges against him were severe. Liam, too, faced serious legal repercussions for his role in the scheme. But for Elliot, this was the beginning of something new. As he sat alone in his office, reflecting on everything that had happened, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The anger, the pain, the betrayal, it was all behind him now. He had regained control of his company, and more importantly, he had freed himself from the toxic relationship that had nearly destroyed him. He no longer had to live in the shadow of Gavin's lies. Elliot was free. Elliot looked out the window, a calm smile spreading across his face. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was in control of his own destiny. The past was over, and now, it was time to move forward.